You guys, introductions.
Sure. Hi, my name is Sophie Blackburn. I'm a standardized patient, and so I do like simulations. They hire actors to play patients. So that's what I do, but I also, now I'm going to nursing school as well. So I'm still doing both of those things.
Great story, I love it.
Yeah, so and then we're doing a workshop here today in this room at 2:23 or 2:27 or some bizarre time like that. But yeah, we'll be in here and doing a workshop about simulation.
Awesome.
I'm Bruno Silva. I'm the head of design and product development at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City.
Excellent, welcome, welcome. Latecomers?
I guess we're doing introductions, right?
Yeah, just a brief introduction.
Okay, I'm Cesar. I'm from Mexico. I'm a pediatrician and a health professional educator.
Excellent. Brief introduction?
Sure. Matt Trowbridge, a physician at University of Virginia School of Medicine.
Great. Last person in? Introduction?
Boris Hansen, medical center.
Excellent. We got a couple people from me now. So welcome everybody. I just wanted to, my name is Sam Rodriguez. I'm a pediatric anesthesiologist. I work here at Lucille Packard, or now Stanford Children's Hospital. I do some virtual reality stuff in the hospital, but the primary part of the first portion of this workshop will be focusing on medical humanities. So like super low tech, like pigments and rocks in mud that you slap onto canvas and glue there with rabbit skin glue, and so like the lowest end technology. And then we'll be talking about the most cutting edge technology in the second half of, I think they started about 50 after. We have what's supposed to be a very, very interactive workshop. You guys can stop us at any time, ask questions. If you are here specifically for virtual reality, we will not be talking about that in the first portion, but you should still stay because this is very, very awesome stuff that we've been doing. I'm going to just expound upon a couple of the introductions that a couple of the people gave here because they are very, very involved in what we have been doing here at Stanford. Yinshi Lerman-Tan, right?
Yeah. Perfect.
She's been teaching us with us for about 3 years now. Genna, Braverman, they help to, they're two of the founders of some of the courses we've been doing here for the medical students, along with Audrey Shafer, who's kind of the key figure at Stanford Medical School for medical humanities and medical humanities advocacy. She is the director of the Medicine and the Muse program here, and I believe did we talk about that at all in that booklet?
Right.
Okay. So there's a little bit more information about that in the booklet. Guys, if you come in, and please feel free to take any of these seats here in the center. We can actually pull up some more chairs here. Now, what we're going to be talking about in the first half of this this workshop is some of the work we've been doing here in the medical humanities. We realize that we're pretty good at training physicians to take multiple choice tests. We're training residents and fellows to be professional test takers and be very, very good at selecting from a single answer when they're given a list of options. We probably are not training them. We probably can do a better job of training them to deal with some of the complexities and ambiguities that you face as actually a practicing healthcare provider by incorporating some of the work that Yinshi spends 100% of her time doing by using the fine arts. So I'm going to talk briefly about a couple classes that we teach here. I want this to be as interactive as possible. Because Yinshi will call on you if no one's speaking up. We're going to have probably 1 to 2 visual observation exercises that we actually would do, and this is actually a piece from the Cantor Museum that we use in our class every year, almost every year, to help train students on a couple key aspects of medical humanities that we have found pair really well with the fine arts. Now, one main area that we focus on, and you guys should come in and take these seats here. I don't want you guys standing, unless you're planning to skate really rapidly.
I'm probably going to leave it.
Okay. You're not going to want to leave. So the kind of the low-hanging fruit, the thing we've been focusing on initially that has been taught for many, many years in a couple medical schools across the country is using the fine arts for observational skills. How can we teach our medical students, residents, most senior clinicians to be more observant of their patients, to better understand the physical exam? And so a couple schools like Yale, Harvard, there's a couple schools in Texas. Audrey, am I leaving? There's a ton of programs. They started bringing students, physicians to the museum and using people who are very passionate about medical humanities, and even bringing non-medicine people like we've done here with our art history program to teach physicians how to systematically go through a work of art and analyze it and interpret it. And we'll do an observational exercise here after I give just a quick debrief about how we set up these classes. We are very fortunate here at Stanford that we have the Cantor Museum about 5 to 10 minute walk from here. We originally wanted this workshop to be there, but because of logistical reasons we couldn't do that. So we actually conduct the entire class at the Cantor Museum. Feel free to come in and we have a couple seats up here. We actually conduct the entire class at the Art Museum. The first half of the class is almost always in the art galleries, where we have art history students, physicians who are passionate about medical humanities, or the museum educators actually lead discussions and systematic visual observational exercises on various works of art in the museum. And those works of art range from anything from abstract sculpture to high realism, narrative, oil painting, which we'll probably look at a little bit here. And we have Jackson Pollock in the new Anderson collection that we've been doing pretty much every year, a completely abstract piece, and it's amazing that the discussions that emerge from that when you have a group of people who are passionate about medicine, most of which who have no experience with art at all. We really see that their observational skills and their ability to articulate those skills come out. We have been expanding the reach of who we are targeting now. Initially, we targeted medical students primarily, but we have since expanded about 2 years ago to a Stanford undergraduate class called the Art of Medical Diagnosis, which is now in its second year. It's an extremely popular class. Fortunately or unfortunately, it's like 99% pre-medical students. It's a kind of a self-selective group. But the students love it. We've had multiple students say that it's their favorite class they've ever taken at Stanford. And I think it's because it really takes them out of that competitive atmosphere that they're used to in all their classes. And now they're working together to help better understand works of art. The grading is very lenient, and it's mostly to get students working together, talking together, working as a team. And we intentionally keep the class size and the group size about the same size as a team that would be rounding, so about 6 to 7 students per piece of art, per educator, so that it really does have that feel of a medical team going around, almost rounding on each piece of art. And we've had tremendous success with that. Any questions on just this brief introduction? I'm going to let Yinshi do a visual observation exercise. We can spend as much time as you guys want on this because this is a workshop. We want it to be pretty flexible. But any questions so far? Audrey, am I leaving anything significant out?
I think it's great. We've also opened the class to some auditors, which I think has lent an intergenerational aspect to it. So people who are in the Distinguished Careers Institute at Stanford, we've had a visiting chaplain, and that has lent some different perspectives, and we have found that using observation in front of a work of art can break down some barriers that otherwise exist.
So I'm going to introduce Yinshi, who's one of our art history PhD students, and she's going to lead us on kind of an example of one of the exercises we would do in the museum. I actually approached the museum staff and said, can they bring this actual painting to the, I asked them, and they said it was like tens of thousands of dollars to transport it and security.
There's a lot of insurance.
Yeah, insurance.
Expensive.
They wouldn't let us do that.
Going on with art. I'm Yinshi, for those who didn't hear my first introduction. I'm a PhD candidate in art history here at Stanford. I work with Alex Nemerov. Maybe those who are Stanford people know of him. He came from Yale a couple years ago and has been sort of ramping up the art history program for undergraduates here at Stanford. So a little bit more background, just to give you a little bit more context. Genna, Braverman, and I both attended Yale, and we had some familiarity with the program at Yale, which was the founding program of this kind, which taught observational skills to medical students. And at Yale, it's now a required part of the first year medical curriculum, so some of you may already have some familiarity with that program as well, but we essentially just exported the Yale program to fit a Stanford model, which did require some changes, including having multiple sessions instead of just one session, which is what they do at Yale. And also we have peer-to-peer teaching, which is another kind of innovation that we've, a little spin that we put on it for Stanford, which is really just by way of the fact that Genna and I are both grad students, a medical student and a grad student, and so we've invited some of our other peers and specifically other art history grad students to come in and lead the sessions in front of the works of art. So there's a kind of fun, like, interdisciplinary peer-to-peer conversation rather than a kind of top-down approach. So as Sam mentioned, I think he covered all of the basics of our class, but essentially for the observational skills class, we have 4 sessions. Each session has a theme, so the first class is about narrative. Other themes we've had include like skin, death, trauma, the body in motion, movement, so things of that nature, and each class is organized around the theme. The first hour of the class is in the gallery, and we look at a work of art that's sort of loosely related to the theme. And then the second half of the class is a lecture by a medical faculty member. And so the medical people on the team, and Genna especially, are very involved in kind of choosing faculty members who are involved in medical humanities and can give a kind of clinical, what we call a clinical correlate to the theme. That focuses on how they use observational skills like the ones we've been working on in the gallery in whatever their sort of area specialty is. So without further sort of prelude, I am going to do just a little observational exercise as we would do in the gallery with you. So if you just
Shades.
is there a place up there? Perfect. Okay. So each class begins in the gallery. This is a painting that we use usually for our 4th session, which is the death session, which sort of appropriately closes our sessions. And the key here, and this is something we exported from the Yale program, is that we really focus on doing 2 different kinds of observation with works of art. So it's not just a free-for-all sort of talk about whatever you want. We spend the first part of the session trying to describe what we're seeing in the most objective terms possible. So that's what I'm going to ask you to do. And obviously, please speak up and don't be shy. And then in the second half of our conversation, and I'll let you know when we reach that point, we can start kind of drawing more interpretation and analysis away from what we're seeing. So the goal here is really, and this is the goal and kind of the mission of the class as I see it at least, is to offer, to suggest that observational skills are a kind of hard skill that you can work on in multiple contexts, including in the gallery, including in clinical practice, and that you can get better at, especially describing what you see, so both observation and description, and in a clinical context, obviously, the point of that would be to communicate with patients or with your colleagues. And so that's what we're really wanting students to focus on, is to not sort of jump to conclusions or assume that everyone sees the same thing. But there is a sort of process to seeing and then drawing conclusions. So this is a painting called Cabin Door, painted in 1889. You can go over to Cantor at lunch and see it today. by Richard LeBar Goodwin. And I won't give you any more background on it, but as I've said, if you could just describe in the most basic terms what it is we're seeing, as if you're describing it to someone who can't see it. So, yeah, feel free to just raise your hand and I'll call on people, or we can just, yeah, go ahead.
Looks like the inside of a wooden door with a dead animal hanging from a hook.
Fantastic. Incredible start. So we have a wooden door, there's an animal hanging off of it.
Overall, it's a picture of a catch of the day for your average hunter.
Great. If I could just pause you and rope it back a little bit, pump the brakes. What makes you say that it's a catch of the day? So what can you point to in the picture specifically in terms of objects, visual evidence that suggests there's a hunter involved?
Oh, great, yeah. Well, hat hung on the door, you have shoes down below the door. It's a well-worn door. The gun and the horn, this is someone who's skilled. This is someone who does this regularly. This is someone who probably does it on a weekly, if not daily basis, knows how to go and hunt.
Great. Wonderful. So yeah, if someone else wants to pick up on these ideas for the well-worn or the daily and point to more kind of visual indicators of those things. Yeah, go ahead.
There are two pieces there that I can't figure out what they're doing on this door. One is the horseshoe, which is also pointing down. Somebody's luck has run out. And I can't tell if that's a postcard. It looks like it's some sort of piece of paper. And those seem, I don't know quite how to fit them in with what else is on that door.
Great. So I think one of the goals here in this first part of the conversation is to take a visual inventory, and I think we're getting closer to hitting on a lot of the big objects. So we've had the hat, the shoes, the animal, and now the horseshoe and this mystery piece of paper. So please fill in whatever we're missing. Yeah.
I'm just fascinated by the worn away feature around the left-hand side of the door. Well, at least it's a painting, right? But if it was a real door, it's a lot of use there, maybe some replacement of handles. It's been around a while, and I'm just intrigued of, you know, what's happened in the days that it's seen.
Yeah, can you, sorry to press you on this, it's really difficult, but could you say a little bit more about what exactly looks worn to you? Could you describe the features?
Well, I guess it starts
worn?
with the discoloration. It looks like there would be some significant texture there as well.
Okay, great.
There's even a hole, like on the horizontal piece, as it approaches the handle, there's maybe even a hole there in the wood, I can't tell.
So here, it looks like there's some like pock marks in the
Yeah. It looks very worn. It's seen a lot of use to it, in and out, it looks like.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder if it's because he's got a dog and the dog hears him and scratches at the lock. You know, like the dog's behind the door, because usually when you hunt, if it's fox, you got a dog with you.
Great.
But the shoes don't look appropriate to me for hunting.
Great. These comments are a little bit more for the second half. The great comments, but more sort of towards the second half about how these marks got there. Our goal for this first part of the conversation is just purely to describe what the marks look like. What color are they? What shape are they? So, again, in clinical practice, you know, the implications of this kind of description are obvious. Rather than saying this person got hit by a baseball bat, you say there's this kind of discoloration on this person's arm in this shape.
I love it because now I can like hear the sound of a dog like scratching on the door. So
yeah.
You're picking up on other senses too. Now I hear this scratching here, and your description of the old door. Now I can kind of like smell this like old, like this smell of old wood there.
Yeah, the sensory kind
those
of
are great.
aspects
Those are great.
Something we can get into. Though vision, I guess, is the primary sense with the picture.
I'm trying to decide what is that the actual entry wound in the fox or not. The red up by the hind leg. There's a red spot over by the tail.
Okay, here.
Yeah,
so
up a little bit.
Okay, so there's a couple of sort of aberrations on the fox, which you pointed out, and It's interesting that when you say entry wound, Sam points to one thing, I point to one thing, and you were gesturing, I think, to this. So again, sort of the value of describing exactly which part of the fox. You're looking at the top reddish, this reddish sort of discoloration near the foot. Could be blood, could be the wound. Yeah, go ahead.
So one thing that's sort of interesting, it's a score from the hook, kind of semicircle there.
Amazing.
So it travels, it must be, I can't quite figure out how that would work, but it must be made by the hook in the process of doing something.
Great, yeah. I think we've all been looking at that, but you just described it for us in a really lovely way.
I'm looking at the fox, and I'm thinking that fox was just shot. And
what makes you say that?
Well, it doesn't look to me like it's stuffed. It looks like it's natural, and it's the last thing he's done. But I'm curious as to why he would set it all up and then put the last thing he's probably shot there at the door.
Yeah, this is great, and again, I want to draw the distinction between the kind of objective description or observation, and obviously there's no such thing as objective observation, but as close to objective as we can get, and the interpretive. So I love what you've said about you're not sure if the fox is dead or alive, or if it's taxidermied, and we can talk about that. I mean, what about the fox can you describe that either makes it look stuffed or taxidermied, or like an animal that's either alive or recently alive? Yeah.
The fox does look full, like if it weren't hanging on the door, that it could be alive. And what I was going to mention as well is that I can see over here the signature of the painter, which is on the door itself, as opposed to being where you think it might be, which is further below, as though it's a play on, is it his signature, or is this the owner of the door and the home in which it is? And I also didn't think that the shoes necessarily looked like a man's shoes, even though I feel that this is a man as a hunter.
Great. So I want to just hone in on the fox a little bit more, and what this question of whether the fox is dead or alive. This is something you can, like a game you can play with art a lot, is like, is the central figure dead or alive, and what makes you think
He doesn't
that?
look like he's, I would
Go
say
ahead.
he's dead, because he doesn't look like he's struggling with his one leg is hung loose down by him. He's hung limp, but he's not swollen up. He hasn't been gutted yet, though.
Great.
And still seems like, you know, the body could still bend and move, and there's not a lot of stiffness yet that would come after a few days of a body being
Great.
lifted.
So very impressive kind of diagnostic observation of the fox, and just kind of the obvious, which is the best in this conversation. It's hanging by a string on a nail, probably dead.
I was
Sorry, go
going
ahead.
to say, on the other hand, could be alive, because there's still a lot of tone in the legs of the fox. Like that hind leg that's not strung up is still held upright. It's not totally limp, but you can definitely feel a lot of gravity weighing down the fox. So, you know, could be still alive or freshly dead.
Yeah, this is great. I love what you did. Feel free to point out whether your comments are more on the dead or alive.
I think it looks actually more alive. There's nothing that's coming out of the animal that's on the floor to indicate that it's dead. Like I would.
Like what would you expect?
Blood or saliva or something like that. And the other thing is the ears and the face look perky. Like it almost looks like it's still alert. There's an alertness in the face because of the ears being pointed up, and the way the neck is positioned. It doesn't look like. I feel like if I was dead, I'd be coming a little more in towards the body as opposed to almost like it's looking. Yeah, it seemed. Yeah, a little more. Yeah, I don't know though.
Yeah, I think those are all really important comments in terms of like a perkiness or uprightness to the ears and also the head. That if this painting were kind of obeying gravity and the laws of physics, that the head maybe would be more, that the nose would be here rather than here. So that there is a kind of maybe uncomfortable animation to this fox that we sort of know is dead.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm from Maine where we hunt a lot.
Yeah,
And
so give us the rundown.
It's a very traditional muzzle-loaded flintlock rifle, which would suggest that this is
Thank
probably
you.
a hunter who takes his guns and his tradition seriously. There's a powder horn hanging from the tip.
Yeah, could you describe like all of the hunting accoutrements as like say what it is in basic terms?
It's a muzzle-loaded gun. It's a muzzle-loaded
Okay.
gun. There's a powder horn hung from the front,
Powder horn.
which would suggest that he self-loads single-shot guns. It's not a repeater, so he's hunting with a single round.
Okay.
So he must be a fairly accomplished hunter. Would argue against the fox being alive. No good hunter would put a gun behind a live fox. And it would suggest that it's probably a traditional hunter in the sense that a postcard with a stamp on it at the top doesn't fit a gun that's probably from a time frame from 80 to 100 years ago.
Thank you. That was incredibly.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to let you guys all know that thing. But so that I think that's all really helpful in terms of just saying. I mean, we have so much more basic info. You know, we think we can basically describe this painting, and then someone else can sort of describe in what they view as the most basic terms what they're seeing, and it's like completely different than what we've brought to the painting so far. So we have so much more information just from someone else saying what it is that they see, and that again is the kind of basic premise of this course.
So really detailed on the hunter, but also the assumption, the gendered pronoun, that's a male hunter. We don't necessarily know that, and I'm thinking about the comment about the boots, and do they seem like a man's boots or a woman's boots? They seem, when I look at them, small compared maybe to the body of the fox, or maybe it's the size of the hat. So I also want to keep us from making too many
Right,
assumptions.
and I think that you're right to sort of, it's good if you're feeling that feeling of let's pull back on the gender of the hunter, because we have not drifted into the kind of analytical or interpretive part of our conversation officially yet. So if someone wants to follow on that and just describe the boots and the hat for us, that would be great. You know, not necessarily analyzing what gender is the person that these belong to, but just describing them in the most basic terms for someone that couldn't see them. Yeah.
So I'm not a boot expert, but it does look, I mean, they look, I would call them, they look almost like, they look like they're possibly handmade. Like they're not like mass-produced boots. You can see like the bottom of the soles, you can kind of almost see like whether it's like stitching or
like little nails around.
Yeah, and all the leather is extremely worn in. You know, the tops of the boot are incredibly well formed, and the leather's so worn in that it's actually almost like, you know, it creases naturally. Like it kind of, you know, it feels like if you touched it, you could easily bend it like the leather.
Really beautiful. So you're drawing our attention to the crease of the boot and the way in which that suggests a boot that's well worn. Yeah, did you want to follow on the boot? Or
Yeah, the boot, yeah. I was going to say, while the creases and everything are there, there's really no mud that I'm seeing on it. They actually look kind of clean for someone, though, that has just come back from hunting. I live in rural Virginia, and I work personally with people who hunt on a regular basis. And so drawing from my personal experience, they come from hunting and they come into a therapy session with me, like fresh out of hunting, and those are actually very clean shoes for someone that went out hunting. And also the hat hanging on the door is the same way. There's no indication of dirty hands or even bloody hands that had to take the hat off. So I'm not even sure if, you know, I can't tell from the painting whether or not the hat and the shoes were used in the process of hunting the fox that day.
Great. I think that your comment and also yours about the lack of blood or saliva that's dripping from the fox gets to the idea, too, that it's really important to say what we're not seeing in, again, very basic terms. So we're not seeing dirt, we're not seeing mud, we're not seeing blood. And these are things that we might expect to see in a post-hunting scene like you've articulated. So that's part of what's on the table for us, is what we see and what we don't see as well.
I'm intrigued by the strap and the way that the gun's positioned. I guess if I had laid my gun up against the door, it would have been out away from the door, leaning into maybe one of the joints of the wood. But the gun, the butt of it is right up against the door, and it's slanted this way, and the strap, anyway, it's just...
Yeah, so how is the gun being supported?
Well, I mean, it looks like there's a belt of some kind or a strap that goes up to the door, and I'm having trouble seeing exactly if that's part of the door or on another hook that's behind the fox's leg there? I can't quite.
Yeah, so there's a bit of like a kind of material jumble here. It's confusing for us, but it does look like the gun is being supported by the strap of this satchel, which might have a technical name, and that the powder horn is then hanging from the barrel of the gun. Is there anything else about the way that anyone wants to speak to about the way that the objects are positioned in space? Yes, go ahead.
For me, I'm having a hard time for the hook to make sense. Like, how is it exactly? What function does it have? Because it doesn't keep the door from being open or shut. The hook that like swings in some way, like normally that would go out of the boundaries of the door to the wall to prevent the door from being open, and it's the mark on the wall is going the opposite way of what would you actually use the hook for.
Great. So a bit of like logical ambiguity, or I mean, it's interesting to think that when you do look closely at a painting, something that seems naturalized and like seems to make sense is actually pretty nonsensical. Yeah.
The presence and location of the horseshoe.
Can you say more?
That it's on the upper part of the door, hung intentionally there for a reason. I don't want to jump to the interpretation yet, but that's going to be a strong part of my interpretation.
Okay, so there's an upside down horseshoe. All right, great. Is there anything that we've left out? Have we touched upon everything in this picture? Like every object in this picture? Yeah, go ahead.
The only thing I would also talk about is the light source. It looks to be one shadow going in one direction. And it looks like a lower light source because you can see the shadow on the boots as well. And it's a warm light too. So it's really, I don't know, high temperature light. So
Fantastic.
Possibly at a fireplace or something. Not, incandescent fluorescent lights. Well, obviously because it's old.
Right. I don't think that there was
Right.
electric light in 1889. Yeah. But great. We have not talked about the shadow that the fox is casting, and also the gun and the boots. So giving us a sense of depth.
But I love the comment about the hook and, potentially a latch that is somewhere off here, and your comment about the light source that just this, the observation of the shadow on the shoes, right? This is a high position light source, the shadow would be cast on the floor, but this is coming very horizontal. So now you guys are starting to describe things that are existing outside of what we're seeing here, and how the artist gave us clues as to where this still life might actually be living.
Yeah, I want to make sure that no one feels like we're leaving out any objects, so let's just get them all down.
Well, I would add to the problematic latch. This door is not currently latched, but somebody has to be on our side of the door because of where the shoes and the gun are positioned. So it's interesting that it's a door that can latch but is not latched at this time, or maybe can latch because of the logical problem.
Really fascinating.
One detail I like is that the letter is being held up underneath like a splintered part of the door. It's like a piece of the veneer or something that is kind of, but it's been adapted for that. I think that's where the mail goes for this person. Or it's an artifact that's special to them, or I can't tell, but that would be something I'd want somebody to know about this.
Yeah, when you go to the Cantor today, you can look closely at this letter, which has writing in French on it and like a number of postmarks, which would give you more clues, but unfortunately we can't see them in the projection. But really great point just to note that this splintered piece of wood is the thing that's supporting the piece of paper. Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing. The fact that the address is outward rather than the written side of what appears to be a postcard. I think it's going to be mailed or just arrived in the mail. Who knows?
Great. So, do you feel like we've left something out that's really big?
The postcard, if you say that it's from France, it raises the question of the social level of the inhabitant, because the door has been green at some point, but they're not bothering to repaint it. It looks like it's really worn out. So you're wondering whether it's their main place of residence, or I would vote for not. Something that they don't use that often, because somebody of this level of wealth at the time, with those, whether they're his or hers, homemade shoes and the expensive looking or nice looking gun would have had this place repainted more often, but we see that it's not repainted, that maybe the latch isn't in good shape either. So
Yeah, I think the fact that you pointed out that the door is green or was green is great. It's like we can get this far in the conversation and no one has said the door is green. And we find in our classes that often there's a kind of elephant in the room, like a central object that no one has spoken about, which is why I'm making sure that no one feels that that's the case. You have one last comment before we switch gears?
Yeah, I think from when we described the object, there was one part which is of the leather strap and the probably satchel. One seems to be like a pine cone, possibly, like right next to the fox. To his, yep.
Okay,
and
so there's like frayed.
And then frayed, probably maybe from the forest or so, but you can't exactly tell what it is. Maybe one looks like a pine cone, the other one some weed or material from the forest.
Yeah. So I think you're pointing to the cross hatching here, which is interesting to identify that as a pine cone. I've always seen it as like a piece of fabric that's frayed, but now that I look at it, it's possible it's a pine cone. So again, important to just note that there is this cross hatching, but it is sort of ambiguous what it is we're looking at in that passage of the painting. So now we get to fully just let it all hang out and let loose and take all of these observations that we've collected and put forth what our sort of hypotheses are about the scene. So feel free to comment on the gender of the hunter, or whether this is or is not a hunter, whether this is this person's home, whatever you want to.
And you guys can get crazy.
say.
I want you to put together like just the most interesting hypothesis
You
as to
can
what's
get
going
crazy.
on. And you guys can completely disagree with each other.
That would
Actually
be
encourage
great.
that.
The only caveat is that there must be visual evidence for whatever it is that you say. So, yeah, go ahead.
I kind of get this general feeling that they were rushed, because like the gun is just not put up like someone else had said. It's not put somewhere where like normally it would be. Maybe there's a rack or something. It's just thrown into the satchel. Their catch of the day or their kill of the day is still hanging up. The hat itself is like pushed into the door. It's not like just nicely taken off and hung. It's like someone like pushed it onto the door. The latch isn't locked, and the shoes would seem like they've just been taken off and kind of piled in front of the door, which I totally don't do ever. But also what's interesting, a lot of you guys were saying that the latch itself, that seems bizarre to you, that seems wrong and weird. But when I was a kid growing up in my house, I had a little latch on my screen door, and it had the same, like a dirt line the same way, and we would just flip it that way. So to me, that seemed totally normal.
Yeah, I think the nonsensical part of the conversation was that whatever the hook hooks into would be on this side, and thus the arc that it makes would be on this side of the door, not this side. Because why is this hook traveling to that side of the door? So I don't know if I paraphrased that. Okay, for you, but yeah.
The only reason I built the go next is that beautifully, I completely disagree. Well, because I see it totally opposite. I see it as that the person is the opposite of rush. I interpreted this as each thing on that door always goes there, and that and my interpretation is this is a person who lives in a solitary lifestyle to the point where they are never. No one else is going to come in that door. So once you come in the door and close it, your boots can go in front of the door, the gun can go against the door, and that's not a problem, because no one else is going to enter from the outside. That was interpreted.
Yeah, and I think that these two comments can coexist, that you're both kind of saying that this has the feeling of like when you drop your keys at home, and you can do that when you're rushed or not, but it's always going to go in the same place. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that everybody alludes to it being at the inside of a door, but I could also see it being the outside, where there's like a porch, and this is maybe the outside of a door that used to be what they built on an attachment to a porch, so now the lock doesn't really matter anymore, and there's another lock outside.
Well, it has a lot of indoor qualities, though, and I think that's why a lot of people allude to it. You have a postcard, you have the hat hung on the door, you have shoes settled in. There's a lot to allude that the person has come home and has settled in on the inside.
Yeah.
I actually
actually, now I'm thinking, how do we know it's a door?
Oh.
Let me tell you why. Because that's some pretty short dude. If you think about it, it's a door. So when I'm thinking, or woman, whatever it is, short, because I'm thinking of like windows and how you board up a window or close a window. And the only reason why I'm saying is the shoes and everything look quite large for a door. Like,
yeah, I think again you're pointing to some of the kind of illogical, like logical fallacies in this picture that
Scale,
like,
I
looks
guess.
really realistic, but then as you start to dig into, well, is the scale of the boots actually appropriate given the scale of the door? There's a lot of things that are sort of inconsistent. So something that appears to be like hyper-realistic, what was in the 19th century called like trompe l'oeil painting, that was very realistic, is actually has a lot of kind of fantasy built into it. Yeah, go ahead.
So just talking about the hook again, that this is fascinating. I never would have even looked at this, but everyone's talking about it. What if he or she had almost OCD traits and would scrape it every day before they locked it?
Yeah, very diagnostic approach to the hook on the door. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I can see some of the outside aspects of this as well, because when I was initially looking at the green on the door or the window or whatever it will be, I was thinking more of high humidity, algae, kind of what you get in the woods on external wood particles, where you get some of that green coming in, and so it has more of that country feel.
Great, yeah, so we can look to specific visual elements like the color of the green to kind of solve this mystery of whether it's an indoor or an outdoor scene.
Yeah. And my comment goes on to the letter or postcard. For me, somebody that puts a postcard or a letter or a piece of mail or whatever by the door or just like sticks it in the door, for me it means like he's been meaning to, or she's been meaning, it's matter of me, it's more a he for me, but that's another conversation. He's been trying or meaning to send it for a while. And like you put it there and you know it's like a pending business, but like every time he goes at the door, he's like, I need to send that.
Yeah, yeah.
I see it sort of as a postmark near the stamp, so it seems to be kind of in a received letter.
Right.
So I interpreted it more like the 18th century equivalent of a refrigerator magnet, where it's like a memento that's something that this person sees and thinks about, and then going to this guy's comment about a person that lives alone. It's like if it's something that you want to see and remind yourself of, then it's from your love overseas.
Yeah, that's, I can tell you that that's like a correct interpretation. In this kind of trompe l'oeil painting in the 19th century, people did kind of include these like nostalgic mementos within the painting, within the compositions of the painting.
Yinshi, let's do
Yeah.
one more
Okay.
from someone who has.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just wondering which way it opens. Like, where are the hinges?
Yeah. So there is a little what appears to be like a handle, but I think the door.
Does it open out? I mean, usually if it's opening in,
Oh,
because
okay,
everything's
great.
leaning on it, we would
Yeah.
see the hinges on this side.
Great, and here you do see the outside of the frame as it's framed in the cantor. So great, no hinges indicating which way the door would open. So I think taking all of these comments, it's fair to say that as a group we can agree that a hunter of some gender came back from hunting and to a place, probably a home, either an interior or exterior door, and hung these items in some order, looked at maybe this memento on the door, and then either walked away from the picture or behind the door. We're not totally sure, but we do have like a general sense, I think, that we've agreed upon of the narrative of this picture.
And sometimes we're left with more questions and more. I mean, you guys generated hypotheses here that we've been doing this for a couple of years that we've never even heard before, and you guys made some great observations.
Yeah.
This is what we would do for the kind of the first half of our class, and in the second half of the class, we actually go down into a lecture classroom that's in the Cantor Museum. And for this one, we actually have a pathologist who comes in and talks about physical exam findings in a deceased patient. which we don't really learn too much about. And they're fascinating, and he actually is able to link some of the stuff he sees in everyday practice to some of the the physical findings that can be observed in paintings like this. What I do in my lecture is we would look at narrative paintings, and then I show pictures of families in the pre-op area or who are about to go undergo anesthesia, and say, what kind of hypotheses can we generate about the relationships in these families? So we would take all of these skills and what you guys have been practicing right here with your observation, be it very objective, and then going on to assessment, and then apply that to clinical cases. You don't need to have a museum to set up courses like this. People have been very creative. You can use projection. We sometimes will use artwork that students have created. We're actually going to do that for this one, but we don't even have enough time to get through one of these. But Audrey, yes?
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I know we're running out of time and we need to move on, but just wanted to say how wonderful it is to work with the art history graduate students in that near-peer mentoring and then the clinical correlates. But several of the goals of the course include what we've just experienced here, which is a curiosity, which is a respect for other opinions, which is honoring ambiguity and even contradiction that you find in clinical practice. So yes, we're focusing on visual, observational skills, translating those skills into a way to verbalize them, but there are other aspects that sort of come organically out of that conversation. I think you guys did an incredible job of demonstrating that, so bravo.
And now we're going to go to super high-tech stuff with the Dr. Axelrod and Lance. Do you guys want the lights on?
Yeah, I'll get them on and I'll change the
Absolutely. And while we're setting up, you guys can feel free to walk up and ask us questions.